I just think it would be less awkward if you heard it from me, Karen said, arms crossed like she was bracing for applause. Her voice had that familiar blend of guilt and entitlement she wore like perfume whenever she knew she was about to set something on fire. Greg didn't respond at first. He just sat there at the kitchen table, squinting over the itemized wedding budget he'd been reviewing for the 5th time that morning. The pen in his hand hovered above a line marked florist, final installment due, Friday. He'd already signed the check. It sat half-folded on top of the folder labeled Rachel Wedding, confirmed. Karen stood in the doorway, not entering, not leaving. Rachel wants Brian to walk her down the aisle, she said. The pen slipped out of Greg's fingers and rolled onto the floor. Brian. She didn't say his last name. She didn't need to. Greg finally looked up, and for the briefest second, she flinched. Just a flicker, like she'd caught a glimpse of something she didn't think he had left in him. She says it would mean a lot, Karen added quickly, shrugging. You can still come, of course, if you want. The silence that followed wasn't passive. It was surgical, cold, precise, like something being excised. Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness. Greg stood up, walked past her without a word, and disappeared into the hallway. Karen called after him. Greg, don't make this weird. It's just symbolic. Brian's been around a lot lately, and Rachel just feels. The door to his home office clicked shut. Locked. Inside, Greg sat in the dark for a long time, the blue light from his monitor casting a glow over the room. Next to the monitor was a small photo. Rachel at 6 years old, beaming in a pink bike helmet, wobbling on the first bicycle he ever bought her. The one he'd assembled by hand in the garage, while Karen claimed she was going to yoga 3 towns over. Greg leaned forward and opened his personal finance folder. 14 transactions related to the wedding. Dress deposit, DJ contract, venue retainer, bar service, makeup artist, honeymoon suite, all funded from his retirement account. Not because he was asked, but because that's what dads do. Or at least, that's what this dad did. He opened his bank app, transferred the wedding account balance, roughly $36,000, back to savings. Canceled the remaining pending transfers. Then he opened his email, drafted one message to the planner. Please remove me from all further coordination. My role is concluded. He clicked send. No anger. No rage. Just subtraction. Greg reached into the drawer for his old journal, the one he hadn't opened in years. Inside it were 2 pages he never tore out. The first was dated 5 years ago, the day he'd found Karen's burner phone hidden behind the laundry detergent. The second, more recent, was the day he quietly bought a small fishing cabin in the Carolinas, under a trust with no family name attached. He checked the flights. One way. Friday. Booked. Then he did something he hadn't done in a while. He smiled. Not out of satisfaction. More like a reflex. Like a man who'd finally stopped waiting for a thank you that was never coming. In the hallway, Karen knocked once. Silence. Then again. Still nothing. Greg, she said through the door. She's still your daughter. Greg didn't answer. Not out of cruelty. Because at that moment, he genuinely wasn't sure if that was still true. At 6:42 a.m., Greg stood in his garage, staring at the old red toolbox that had once been Rachel's favorite hiding spot for her crayon drawings. The drawer stuck now. Everything stuck lately. His truck's key fob was still on the hook, right where it had always been. But the envelope taped underneath the shelf was new. Labeled, Cabin, Contingency Plan. Inside, deed copy, access code, burner phone, cash. He didn't hesitate. By 7:03, the last check, the caterer's, was voided in his online banking portal. Per client request. Services no longer required. That's all he wrote in the notes. Just like the others. He called the planner next. Her voice, too cheery for someone who'd clearly spent the last month bleeding him dry. Mr. Whitaker, we're on track for rehearsal dinner. Just a few confirmations for the... I'm stepping away from this, Greg said. Pause. I'm sorry. You'll need to reassign your point of contact. I won't be participating further. Another pause. But, I was told you're covering. You were misinformed. Then click. Next, his attorney. Morning, Doug. Need a quick amendment. Rachel's out. Everything goes to charity. Hospice fund in Cincinnati. And remove Karen's survivorship clause. Doug's silence on the other end was almost impressed. Greg, are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything I've done. By noon, Greg had closed 4 financial accounts, updated his estate directive, forwarded his mail to a P.O. box 2 counties over, and sent one last transfer from his joint checking, $117.32. Just enough to avoid suspicion, not enough to do damage. Then came the final step, the one that felt surgical. He opened an old, unmarked folder on his desktop. Rachel's first car, title. He stared at the scanned bill of sale for the silver Civic he bought her after graduation. The one she totaled last year. She never paid him back. Never even said thanks. Just said, "You're the dad? Aren't you supposed to?" He deleted the file, like it never existed. That night, Karen knocked again. Not as gently this time. "Greg, come on. You've made your point. She didn't mean to hurt you. You can still be there. Just let Brian." Still silence. By morning, Greg was gone. The truck wasn't. He didn't take the obvious route. That would have been theatrical. Instead, a cab showed up at 5:40 a.m., headlights off. He took one bag. No goodbye, not even to the dog. At 9:12 a.m., Karen opened the fridge and found his note taped inside. One line, "Please don't water the plants. They're already dead." She didn't understand what it meant. Not yet. But later that afternoon, when Rachel called sobbing about a florist who hadn't been paid and a DJ who said Greg canceled, Karen started to feel the edges of something tightening. Not a tantrum, not a power play, something worse. Greg hadn't stormed out. He had simply extracted himself, quietly, methodically, like a man removing a cancerous root from his own life before it spread. "I'm telling you," he's sulking, Karen said, swirling her mimosa with a smug little twist of the wrist. "He'll show up. Greg doesn't know how to stay mad. He just wants us to beg." Rachel didn't look up from her phone. She was busy choosing between 2 filtered photos, one of her laughing beside Brian in front of the venue fountain, and another where he had his hand on her shoulder, giving his best attempt at a fatherly smile. She picked the second one, captioned it, "The best stand-in a girl could ask for, clinking glasses, #blessed, #wedding week." The likes started rolling in within minutes. Heart emojis. "So sweet. You deserve the best." Not a single mention of Greg. At the boutique, the mood was light. Champagne was poured. Karen posed with Rachel in front of the mirror, beaming like she was the bride herself. "Greg would have hated this," she said with a laugh, adjusting the strap on Rachel's dress. All the fuss, the fittings, the color swatches, he'd have made that grimace like he was passing a kidney stone. The bridal assistant returned moments later, her smile tight. "Sorry to interrupt, but we haven't received the final installment on the gown. Our system's showing the invoice as disputed." Karen blinked. "No, that can't be right. My husband," she stopped. "My ex-husband paid that weeks ago." "I'll double-check," the assistant said, already walking away. Rachel brushed it off. "It's just a glitch. He probably used the wrong card." But that afternoon, another glitch surfaced, this time at the florist. No payment confirmation. No scheduled delivery. When Rachel tried to call, the florist voicemail was full. "God, he's really being petty," Rachel muttered. Karen nodded but said nothing. She was staring at a text from the venue manager. One she didn't show her daughter. "Hi Karen, just confirming the rehearsal is still on. I noticed the payment was reversed. We'll need full settlement before Friday or we can't proceed. Let me know." She replied quickly, "It's being handled." Just a hiccup. But it wasn't just a hiccup. It was a slow, deliberate hemorrhage. A subtle unraveling of everything they'd built on Greg's back, and they hadn't even noticed the floor sagging beneath them. Brian, meanwhile, was enjoying his 15 minutes. He ordered extra wine at every lunch, told anyone who listened that Rachel always needed someone more present, and referred to Greg as the prototype in passing conversation. At one point during brunch, as they toasted new beginnings, Karen raised her glass and chuckled. "Well, at least Brian won't bore the guests like Greg would have. Remember his speech at Rachel's graduation? I thought the principal was going to fall asleep." Rachel laughed. So did her friends. They didn't see the waiter glance at them sideways, pause with the pitcher of water, and shake his head before moving to another table. Nobody at that table knew that the DJ had already packed up his equipment after receiving a cancellation notice with the subject line, "Client disengaged. All deposits void." Nobody knew the bar tab Greg had arranged for the reception was now flagged with a red banner on the vendor's dashboard. "Payment withdrawn. Unresolved dispute." Nobody knew, because they never bothered to ask who was still holding the strings. They just assumed Greg would sulk, then bend. But Greg wasn't sulking. Greg was subtracting. Quietly, surgically, precisely. And by the time anyone realized it, they'd already smiled for the cameras, standing on a stage he'd already lit on fire. The first thing they noticed was the heat. It hit them like a wave the moment they stepped out of the rental car, sticky, unrelenting, July in Ohio heat. No hum from the air conditioning units. No ambient music through the outdoor speakers. No staff bustling around with clipboards and walkie-talkies. Just dead silence in the distant whine of cicadas. Rachel adjusted the hem of her rehearsal dress and looked around. Why is it so empty? Karen tried the front doors. Locked. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she spotted movement. Someone in a blue polo emerging from a side door. The venue manager, a lanky guy named Mark, was carrying a box of unsold champagne flutes and looked far more interested in the cicadas than the bride. "Hi," Karen called, forcing a smile. "We're here for the rehearsal?" Rachel Whitaker. Mark didn't even reach for a clipboard. "Oh, yeah. So there's been a bit of a snag," he said, scratching behind his ear. "The payment was reversed last night. All of it." Karen blinked. "What do you mean, reversed?" "The deposit went through weeks ago." He nodded. "Yep, but the final check bounced. And then we got a notification the whole transaction was disputed, fraud alert or something. Policy says no funds, no event." Rachel stepped forward, her voice sharp. "We have a wedding in 24 hours. We sent out 200 invitations. The dress fitting is at 6. The officiant is flying in from Atlanta." Mark raised both palms like a man trying to avoid stray bullets. "Hey, I'm just the messenger. We sent 2 follow-up emails. Got no reply. I'd let you in, but my manager's strict. If we host a rehearsal with a flagged account, we're liable." Karen's voice trembled. "Let me just make a call." She stepped away, dialing Greg for the 5th time in 3 days. Voicemail. Again. She left no message. There wasn't much to say. Rachel was pacing now, heels clicking like gunshots against the concrete. Where the hell is the florist? They were supposed to deliver the arch and the centerpieces by noon. Karen tried her number. Straight to voicemail. Rachel screamed into the sky. "Unbelievable. I swear to God, if Greg is doing this to punish me." But before she could finish, her phone buzzed. Text from Melissa, Florals and Design. "Hi Rachel. Our delivery is on hold. Per our contract, non-payment void service. Please contact our office to resolve balance. We're happy to assist once cleared." Rachel threw the phone at the ground. It bounced once, cracked the screen. Brian, ever the dependable fill-in, was conspicuously absent. Karen tried his number. It rang 3 times before going to voicemail. She left a breathless, panicked message. "Brian, we're at the venue. It's locked. Everything's a mess. Please call me." No response. She looked around. Guests had started arriving, parents of the groom, cousins, one elderly aunt with a walker and a bad knee. People with nowhere to sit, nothing to rehearse, no idea why they were standing in 91-degree heat under a powerless pavilion. And then, just to really complete the picture, the sprinkler system kicked on at the far end of the garden, soaking the folding chairs Greg had once insisted on upgrading to something dignified. Karen pulled out a tissue, dabbed her forehead. Rachel sat on the concrete, dress rumpled, makeup sliding, eyes vacant. For the first time, neither of them said a word. They didn't need to, because in that moment, it was unmistakably clear. Greg wasn't coming, and he hadn't just withdrawn. He had dismantled the entire operation while smiling in their faces. Everything had looked intact until they tried to use it. Now it was nothing but props. A wedding-shaped mirage. And they were the only ones still pretending it was real. By noon, the parking lot was full of confused guests in pastel dresses and borrowed suits, fanning themselves with folded programs that read, "Rachel and Brian, a new chapter." The ceremony was supposed to start at 1 o'clock. At 1:12, the DJ table sat empty. No booth. No speakers. Just a plastic folding chair with a tangled AUX cable tossed on top like a relic from a forgotten era. The string lights strung across the ceremony arch flickered sporadically, half of them dead, the rest dim and sputtering like they were powered by a dying car battery. A few guests murmured, looking at each other. Was this the aesthetic? In the bride's makeshift prep room, a converted janitor's closet inside the venue's side wing, Rachel was crumpled in a cheap velvet chair, mascara streaked down both cheeks, hair still in curlers. Her dress was still at the boutique. Karen had tried to pay for it that morning, card after card. Declined. Every one. The boutique owner, politely but firmly, had said, "We can't release it until the balance clears." "I'm sorry." So Rachel now sat in an emergency dress, a department store bridesmaid gown 3 sizes too big, pinned at the back with binder clips. She looked like a child playing wedding with her mother's old nightgown. "I can't go out like this," she whispered, voice shaking. "People will laugh." Karen crouched beside her, smoothing her shoulder. "They won't laugh, honey. They'll understand." Rachel looked up, red-eyed. "Where is Brian?" The door creaked open. Speak of the devil. Brian stumbled in, dress shirt half-buttoned, sunglasses still on, reeking of whiskey and bad decisions. He had a to-go cup from a local pub and an unlit cigar tucked behind one ear like some midlife pirate. "Ladies," he slurred, arms wide. "We ready to do this?" Rachel bolted upright. "Are you drunk?" "Just a couple nerves, sweetheart. I mean, this is kind of a lot, right?" He looked around the janitor's closet like it was a 4-season suite. "I gotta be honest, I don't feel great about being, like, a replacement dad. I mean, I didn't raise you." That was Greg. He said Greg's name like it was a curse, like he couldn't stand the taste of it in his mouth. Karen stood. "Brian, not now." But he wasn't finished. "This whole thing's weird. I thought I was here to help, not to become the guy." He gestured vaguely toward the half-lit reception hall. "It's like everyone's pretending." Karen grabbed his elbow, hissing, "You need to pull it together." Out at the altar, the officiant stood awkwardly beneath a deflating floral arch. Guests shifted in their seats, whispering. The groom, Rachel's high school sweetheart, now visibly sweating through his tuxedo, checked his watch again. Still no music. Still no food. No announcements. No bride. A waiter passed by with a single tray of finger sandwiches, leftovers from a separate event the day before. A bridesmaid grabbed 2 and stuffed them in her clutch. The officiant approached the groom. "Should we delay?" The groom didn't answer. The shame was no longer subtle. It was tangible, sticky, hanging in the humid air like the smoke from Brian's unlit cigar. One by one, people began to realize something was off. Not just a little disorganized, wrong. By 2:10, an elderly uncle had already left. By 2:20, the flower girl's mother was loudly asking whether this is some kind of prank. And by 2:30, someone finally whispered what they were all thinking. "Where's the father of the bride?" No one had the answer. But the absence was no longer silent. It had become a performance. And the performance was a tragedy. The first digital pebble that started the avalanche came from Rachel's cousin, Megan, the one with the perpetually dyeing hair and an online presence as dramatic as her perfume. At 3:04 p.m., while standing outside the powerless venue holding her melted makeup kit, Megan fired off a tweet between bites of a soggy cucumber sandwich. Bride's real dad bailed on the wedding, paid for everything, then pulled the plug because she picked her mom's affair partner to walk her down the aisle. This town is unhinged. #Whitaker wedding, #awkward AF. It went viral in under an hour. Locally viral, sure. But in a small Ohio town, that's all it takes to go nuclear. By 4 p.m., someone from Rachel's old high school class posted a TikTok from the parking lot with text overlaid. "No food, no music, bride crying, venue dark. Groom's crying too, I think. Heard her dad canceled it all after finding out he was replaced by the side piece." Back at Greg's former neighborhood, 3 retirees played poker on a front porch. One of them, Alan, Greg's ex-coworker from the county housing board, put down his cards and squinted at his phone. "You guys seen this? Rachel Whitaker's wedding blew up." "Oh, the one Greg paid for?" "Apparently, not anymore." Laughter. Across town, in the break room of a dental clinic, someone read the tweet aloud to Karen's old coworker, Lisa, who promptly texted it to the group chat named Bunko Divas. "Guess Karen's chickens finally came home." Greg always did keep the receipts. Literally. By dinner, the chatter moved from the apps to the asphalt. Neighbors whispered on driveways while grilling. The bar down on Milton Street added a drink special called the Silent Exit Bourbon Neat, no ice. And in the town's Facebook group, Chardon Chatters, Local Love and Drama, a post titled, "Did you hear what happened at the Whitaker wedding?" racked up 327 comments in 5 hours. People who hadn't spoken to Greg in years suddenly recalled every vague clue, every quiet moment at church where he'd politely declined to talk about family stuff. Someone dug up an old community award Greg had won for organizing a fundraiser in 2012. "A man like that doesn't just walk away," one woman commented. "He chooses when to vanish." And this was no accident. Meanwhile, a local reporter from the County Register messaged Greg's brother, Tom, who ran the hardware store. "Hey Tom, off record, any truth to the rumors about Greg pulling out of Rachel's wedding? Word is, he paid for it all, then left. We're running a weekend feature on small-town chaos." Tom didn't reply. He just locked his phone, stared at the counter for a long moment, then quietly flipped the closed sign. He knew Greg wouldn't say a word. That was the worst part for Karen and Rachel. He hadn't screamed, hadn't stormed out, hadn't even defended himself. He had simply let the weight of their own actions drop, like gravity pulling a chandelier down from a fraying cord. And now, with every tweet, every whisper, every post, that chandelier was falling fast. And the whole town had a front row seat. By 6:15 p.m., what remained of the reception looked like the aftermath of a school fundraiser gone terribly wrong. The chairs were still out, scattered and half-occupied by dazed relatives chewing through vending machine trail mix. The venue's emergency lights flickered like a dying bug zapper above the dance floor, which was, ironically, immaculate, untouched, and painfully silent. There was no music, no dinner, no laughter, just the low-grade murmur of guests trying not to say what they were all thinking. This wedding is a corpse, and no one had the decency to bury it. Karen stood near the gift table, staring blankly at the untouched stack of monogrammed favors, engraved keychains that now felt sarcastic. "R&B, forever starts today," she cracked. No slow burn, no gradual unraveling, just a full, gasping collapse into the white chair next to the unplugged sound system. She began crying, the kind of cry that makes strangers look away and friends pretend they didn't see it. Full body, shoulders shaking, makeup running, a jagged mess of moans and swallowed sobs. Nobody moved to comfort her, because by now, even her oldest friends weren't sure what side they were on. Inside the bridal suite, the air smelled like hairspray and panic. The room was hot, overheated from the broken HVAC, and Rachel was pacing barefoot on the tile, holding her phone like it was a lifeline. She had tried calling Greg 4 times already. This was the 5th. Still no answer. Straight to voicemail. She didn't even leave a message. What could she possibly say? "Sorry I used your money to hand your roll to the guy who slept with your wife? Hope you're enjoying the beach while we rot in public?" She slammed the phone down on the vanity and stared at herself in the mirror. The department store dress clung awkwardly to her back, where it had been pinned. One of the clips had slipped, and now it gaped open slightly, revealing the skin Greg once kissed goodnight after reading her bedtime stories about talking frogs and brave little girls. Outside the suite, Brian was pacing, red-faced and swaying. "I told you this was a mistake," he barked. "I'm not built for this kind of pressure. I was trying to help. Not. What did you think this would feel like? Huh? That we'd just swap Greg out like a light bulb and no one would notice the room got colder?" Rachel shoved the door open and glared at him. "You wanted to do it. You said yes." "I said yes because you asked me to," he snapped. "You, and your mom, and your stupid idea of a picture-perfect moment. I didn't think he'd actually vanish. Who does that? He paid for the whole damn wedding, Brian. Every inch of it. And I didn't even realize until the goddamn DJ vanished like Houdini." "Well, maybe he finally realized what everyone else already knew," Brian muttered. "That no one appreciates him." Rachel stepped back like he'd hit her. And in the hallway, someone opened a door too loudly. A guest shuffled past them with a paper plate holding a single dinner roll and 2 melted peppermints. This was no longer a wedding. This was a wake. Karen locked herself in the suite and refused to come out. When the groom eventually approached the door, timid, pale, sweaty, Karen just shouted, "Go home." And then, silence. Rachel tried Greg again. Still voicemail. She stared at the blank screen, fingers trembling, and whispered, "Dad, please." But the phone didn't ring. Greg's silence wasn't the absence of sound. It was a mirror, and it was finally showing them exactly what they'd become. Sunday morning, while Rachel lay curled on the floor of the bridal suite, still in the wrinkled dress, surrounded by wilting roses and unfinished apology drafts, a photo appeared on Facebook. It wasn't posted by Greg. It came from a man named Dave Holloway, an old fishing buddy from his construction days, who had no interest in drama and barely knew how hashtags worked. The picture showed Greg in a windbreaker, holding a striped base with both hands, grinning like someone who had just remembered what peace felt like. The Atlantic glimmered behind him, calm and wide and indifferent to the wreckage he'd left behind in Ohio. The caption was simple. Greg came down last minute. Said he needed air. Best weekend I've had in years. There was no mention of weddings, no references to Rachel, Karen, or even the implosion. Just joy. Clean, unashamed joy. It took 12 minutes for someone to screenshot it and text it to the Bunko Divas group chat. 20 for it to appear in the Chardon Chatters Facebook group with the caption, "While the wedding burned down, Dad went fishing." By lunch, it was on Twitter, paired with a side-by-side image of Rachel's crumpled figure at the reception and Greg's serene grin by the sea. The meme format did the rest. Left the bride, caught a base. The fish respects him more than his family did. Mood. Greg with a beer in hand while Ohio burns. Karen's friend Melanie texted her the screenshot without a word. Just the image and the timestamp. Karen stared at it for a long time before throwing her phone against the closet wall. Back in town, even the people who had initially tiptoed around the drama were now openly talking. The bar's chalkboard read, "Greg's gone fishing, whiskey shots special $6. Greg's former co-worker Alan commented under the photo, "This is what grace under fire looks like." Someone from the church choir posted, "He was always the quiet one. Guess he found the loudest way to speak." That afternoon, a local journalist finally got brave enough to try. She sent an email to the forwarding address she'd obtained through public records. Polite, professional. "Hi Greg, I'm running a feature about the Whitaker wedding. There's a lot of chatter. Would love your side of things." Even just a quote. Greg read it while sitting on the cabin porch, salt air in his lungs, his coffee still warm in the mug. He didn't reply. He didn't delete it, either. He just closed the laptop and went back to whittling the driftwood in his hand. It wasn't a hobby. Just something to do that didn't involve thinking about people who traded loyalty for spectacle. His silence traveled faster than any scandal. It became legend. Because he didn't need to scream. The wreckage did it for him. And with every unanswered call, every image of him smiling by the ocean, every public meltdown back in Ohio, his calm became radioactive. Not out of spite, but because, finally, Greg Whitaker had stopped explaining himself. And when a quiet man stops explaining, people finally start listening. On Monday morning, the town's local news blog, the Chardon Ledger, published what it called a community snapshot, a euphemism for local gossip dressed in journalism's Sunday best. The headline was impossible to ignore. "Father pays for wedding, then gets replaced by wife's affair partner." His response, "Vanish and cancel everything." It didn't name names, but everyone knew. Photos accompanied the article. A dimly lit venue, a crumpled guest list, wilted flowers dumped in a side alley trash can, a blurry screenshot of the infamous Facebook fishing photo. The final blow, a cell phone picture of Rachel, disheveled and crying in what looked like a janitor's closet. The reporter had done her homework. The article was careful, no slander, no wild claims. Just dots connected with surgical precision. Receipts referenced. Quotes pulled from public posts before they were deleted. Even a line from Meghan's viral tweet. Within hours, the Ledger's website crashed from traffic. By noon, Buzzline Daily had picked it up under their human interest section with the headline, "Bride ditches dad for mom's ex-lover. He quietly destroys the wedding from behind the scenes." That's when it really blew up. Twitter lost its mind. This man is Thanos in a flannel shirt. Greg didn't get mad. He got legendary. Silent revenge is the most powerful genre. The story began circulating through Reddit threads, group chats, and even meme pages typically reserved for jokes about dads falling asleep during NCS. Some therapist with a blue checkmark tweeted, "What this man did was not revenge, it was self-respect hitting its boiling point." Meanwhile, Karen sat in Rachel's guest bedroom, curtains drawn, lit only by the glow of her iPad screen and her shame. Every ping from her inbox was another notification she didn't want. She hadn't even opened Facebook that morning. Someone else had sent her the article in a text, with nothing but a skull emoji. She tried logging in to respond. A post, a comment, anything to shift the narrative. But it was pointless. The top comment under the Ledger article had 14K upvotes. She didn't just burn the bridge. She handed the matches to her affair partner and asked her dad to build the damn thing first. Rachel, in the kitchen, refreshed her own socials in a panic. The comments were brutal. Daddy's money, but not daddy's walk. Hope that DJ accepts tears as payment. Imagine replacing your actual dad with the guy who broke up your parents and thinking there wouldn't be consequences. She deleted her Instagram, then Twitter, then TikTok. Karen followed soon after. But by then, the screenshots were already everywhere. The internet doesn't care if you delete something. It remembers. And in every group chat, message board, and headline, the message was the same. Greg hadn't gone nuclear. He'd simply disappeared. And his absence echoed louder than any explosion. He didn't fight to defend his honor. He let their betrayal rot in daylight, uninterrupted. And now, with the entire country watching, Karen and Rachel realized something far worse than being humiliated. They'd underestimated a man who never raised his voice, because he'd never needed to. He knew silence would finish what their cruelty started. It was 3 weeks after the wedding that wasn't when Greg finally returned to town. He didn't announce it. No Facebook check-in, no calls, no knocking on old doors. He simply needed lumber. The back porch of the cabin had a soft spot in the planks, and there was something almost poetic about fixing your own foundation while others watched theirs rot. So he parked his truck outside Holbrook's Hardware, same as he had for 20 years, and walked in like a man who had never left. The bell above the door jingled. Everything smelled the same: pine, rubber, and dust. The kind of place where time moved slower, or maybe just refused to move at all. He was in aisle 7, comparing cedar boards, when he heard the unmistakable voice behind him. Not loud, not angry, just broken. "Dad?" Greg didn't turn right away. He stared at the grain of the wood in his hands. It was clean, unblemished, straight. No knots, no rot. Something reliable. He placed it carefully back on the shelf. "Dad, please." The voice cracked mid-syllable. A plea caught in the throat. He finally turned. Rachel stood at the end of the aisle, makeup-free, in faded jeans and an oversized sweatshirt. Her eyes were rimmed red. No wedding ring. Her phone hung limply in her hand like she'd forgotten she was holding it. She took one step toward him, then stopped. "You were right," she whispered. "About all of it." Greg didn't move. His face didn't change. He didn't flinch, or sigh, or shake his head. He just looked at her. Not like a stranger. Not like a father. Like a man remembering that once, long ago, he had stood in a courtroom watching his family choose someone else. Like a man who had silently swallowed the bitterness of being replaced, dismissed, and expected to keep smiling while funding the entire performance. He took a breath. Small. Steady. Then turned back toward the lumber rack. Rachel stepped forward. "Dad, I was stupid. Karen made it sound like." But the words fell apart, because she wasn't even sure which version of the lie she wanted to defend anymore. Greg didn't answer. He didn't need to. He simply picked up the cedar board again, checked the edge, and began walking toward checkout. She followed him, trailing behind like an apology with no legs. "I miss you," she said, desperate now. I didn't know how much until you were gone." Greg paused at the end of the aisle, not to look back, just to shift the board under his arm. Then, without turning, he said one sentence. Not cruel, not loud, just final. "You made that decision before I did." And with that, he walked to the register, paid in cash, and left. No hug, no scene. Just a man who had once been left standing in the emotional rubble of his own family, now walking away from the ashes they made without him. And for the first time in Rachel's life, her father didn't offer to fix it. He let her stand alone.